Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another episode of Podio Commentary. My name is Matt Jarbo. Today we're going to be talking about a movie that speaks to my soul. It speaks to me on so many levels. And that, of course, is Kyle Mooney's Y2K. I finally saw this movie last night, and I am very glad that I did. I will definitely be watching this one again. I'm just going to start off by saying it. The reviewers and the people who saw this in theaters who gave it a C- cinema score, you all have lost your damn minds. This movie, it might just speak to me because Y2K was an interesting point in my life. I was 17 years old. I was almost 18. I had just moved from Portland, Oregon, down to San Diego, California a month earlier. I was a senior in high school. This was like a big deal. I remember on that night, on New Year's Eve, 2000, I didn't know anyone in San Diego. We had gone to Mexico a couple days beforehand. My stepdad brought back a whole bunch of tequila and Cuban cigars. And so we just sat around and I did tons of shots of tequila and smoked Cubans while the clock struck midnight. And then I got on AOL Instant Messenger and I chatted with my friends from Oregon. And so the fact that this movie opens up with Jaden Martell and Rachel Zegler and Julian Dennison all chit-chatting on AOL Instant Messenger speaks to my soul. No, I really enjoyed this movie. I do not understand the hate at all. And as soon as I got done watching it, I wanted to talk about it because this is a wild film. But as always with some of these movies that kind of come and go, and I hate to say it, that it kind of came and went, you really have to kind of go digging for information. So if you don't know, this movie is about the events, very heavily fictionized, apocalyptic science fiction horror comedy about the events of what happened when the clock struck midnight on 2000. And Y2K was a thing. In this particular movie, it is literally all about technology coming to life and wanting to rid humanity, and then kids trying to survive it. Standard stuff you would have gotten from horror movies or movies like that in the 90s and getting it done today. And it's got, Fred Durst is in the movie for a fair amount. Alicia Silverstone is in the movie. It's crazy that Alicia Silverstone is in the movie. I love it. Not only that, but Tim Heidecker is in it too. And I think that's a little bit weird. If I'm being honest, Tim Heidecker being the dad, being Eli's dad is a little bit weird because he's married to Alicia Silverstone. And I'm all like, well, if that nerd can get Cher from Clueless, then yeah, bring it on, baby. Maybe I got a shot. And, I'm only 42. She's 48, but I'll make it work. You guys got to understand, my first big celebrity crush was Alicia Silverstone. When Clueless came out, that broke my brain, man. I was looking up anything and everything I could. I was like as much obsessed with her as I possibly could be, without it getting too creepy over that particular summer. So I'm glad she's having a comeback. And so we'll be talking about Alicia Silverstone in an upcoming episode where I talk about the movie Crazy House, which is going to be interesting. Anyway, this is funny because the last movie I talked about was Getaway, which is kind of like an A24 inspired elevated horror comedy spoof parody sort of thing. And this one is actually an A24 horror comedy that doesn't feel like an A24 movie, which is maybe one of the reasons why it failed to connect with particularly that audience. And Kyle Mooney is kind of an odd choice. You know what I mean? Like when I saw that this was going to be written and directed by Kyle Mooney, and I'm like, really? Like SNL Kyle Mooney? Not to say that I dislike him. I do like him, but I never really kind of like got that vibe out of him. But now after watching this and him also being in the movie, you could kind of see he was playing a bit of an SNL type character in the film. But I do think he did a good job directing this, and he understood how to blend horror and blend comedy. And that also was very much backed up by a very good script written by him and his friend Evan Winter. Now, what I find to be really fascinating about this is kind of doing some digging around the web and trying to figure out where he came up with the idea. So in a big, long interview with The Ringer, I'm going to kind of summarize a bit of it here. He talked about how he was inspired by his own personal nostalgia for the late 1990s. I mean, we're coming in to the mid 2020s. So we're only a couple years away from when 30 years of late 1990s nostalgia is going to be rolling in the deep, as Adele would say. Yeah, I'm sorry I said that. I shouldn't have said that. That was a dumb joke. But largely it's like, but we're getting to that point. Okay. And I'm 42, almost 43. So when we start kind of edging into where I'm in my mid to late 40s, that is going to be something that I feel heavily. And I do think this movie is really kind of pulling from that in a good way. So after being a little bit too hungover on New Year's Day, 2019, he was a little creatively inspired. He kind of woke up, again, I'm paraphrasing here, and he had this vague idea because he had an interest in Y2K because it was a disappointment. It really was a disappointment. Everyone's kind of waiting. Like I said, I was drunk on tequila, smoking Cuban stogies, and waiting for the ball to drop. I'm like, well, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die drunk. That was my philosophy at the age of 17. And, now all these years later, I can openly admit to being an underage alcoholic. I'm kidding. I wasn't alcoholic, but I was drunk that night. And so because Y2K was a disappointment, and he wanted to reflect on that anticlimactic transition into the new millennium, he then went on to imagine a scenario where the feared technological meltdown actually materialized, flipping the whole historical narrative on its head. So then he reached out to his longtime collaborator and friend, Evan Winter, with a single, in his words, groggy text, just says, "Got this idea." And together they began brainstorming and writing the script, weaving through numerous late 1990s references to pop culture. And they also wanted to kind of like vet cultural touch points through shared memories. And they found it to be kind of pretty significant. And it did help advance the screenplay. And again, the best way to describe this movie, I think, to people out there who may not know what to think about it, is it's like Superbad meets Maximum Overdrive. Like, there are references in this movie to Maximum Overdrive. Like, this is Maximum Overdrive, but not done, by Stephen King. And not as good as Maximum Overdrive, because I absolutely adore that film. But you can basically say it's Superbad meets Maximum Overdrive. And I will fully admit, their use of music in this movie was really, really, really good. Because, I mean, sure, maybe in that regard, I'm the target demographic, all right? You play a 90s pop, hit, and I'm going to be like taken back to like the summer of 95, when I'm laying in bed at 3 a.m. and I'm listening to Portland Z100, and I call in. Oh, no, this is actually a true story. So back in 1998, I was listening to Z100 one night in the middle of the night, and I really wanted to hear Seal. I don't know why. I think I just wanted to hear Kiss from a Rose. So I called the radio station to make a request, and it turns out I was the 10th caller. And I didn't even realize. So I made the request, and then he's like, "Oh, by the way, you're caller number 10. And I'm like, oh, what I win? And he's like, "You won tickets to go to our premiere of the new DreamWorks animated movie Ants." True story. I called randomly in the middle of the night to request the Seal song, and I won tickets to the premiere of Ants. And yes, I went to go see it. And yes, I liked Ants. Bug's Life is better, but I liked Ants. And so like the 90s were just kind of full of those kind of weird times, I feel. And so, but a lot of us back then, we really vibed with the music. And I think that was something that they did a great job with this movie. And it just kind of pulled from all that, right? They had like Praise You from Fatboy Slim, Tub Thumping. All right. Who doesn't love Tub Thumping from Chumbawamba? Candy by Mandy Moore, 9 p.m. Till I Come from ATB. You had Break Stuff from Limp Bizkit. You had Faith from Limp Bizkit. You had Six Underground from Sneaker Pimps, a highly underrated but beloved track introduced to me in 97 when I saw the movie Spawn. Freak on a Leash by Korn, 93 Till Infinity from Souls of Mischief. Closing Time from Semisonic. That is just an epic song in and of itself. And there's so much conversation in this movie about music, right? And mostly about rap, which is kind of interesting in and of itself. But that being said, it's like they really played up a lot of the great 90s tunes that invoked a lot of emotion for me while watching it. And this movie had a budget of like $15 million. So I would assume that a fair amount of that actually went to getting the music rights, especially in the in the porta potty scene. Because during that scene, as the porta potty slides down the hill and it all goes slow, you hear Back at One by Brian McKnight play, and it was such an awesome use of that song. It's really funny how they put this whole thing together. And so really during all of this, as they were kind of like combining everything, it is to some extent, according to Kyle Mooney, deeply autobiographical. He stayed at home on New Year's Eve, 1999, watching MTV's Millennium Countdown. He saw Y2K as an opportunity to kind of reimagine it through the lens of a Millennium set, Dazed and Confused. It's definitely not Dazed and Confused. It doesn't have those characters or really even that setting. And even though you are following these kids through this apocalypse where all of their friends are dying in incredibly violent and brutal ways, it doesn't fit the same kind of vibe. Because in that particular moment, then you could kind of make the argument that Kyle Mooney is attempting to kind of coin himself as the Matthew McConaughey from Dazed and Confused, which he is not. He is in no way. He's good in the movie, but he's not McConaughey. And I kind of feel like if he's making that comment, that's where he kind of vibes himself, and maybe not. But what's really funny apparently is Mooney grew up in San Diego. So he was in San Diego on New Year's Eve, 1999. And I was in San Diego on New Year's Eve, 1999. And that's pretty cool. And he's got a lot of love of pop culture, George Lucas, Spielberg, those guys who are really good at crafting, worlds. Never mind his familiarity with like the high school archetypes. Because if he was 15 when Y2K happened, it's kind of like going back to the concept of Superbad, where in Superbad, it really was Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg when they were 17. Even going as far as to calling themselves Seth and Evan, it is, very, very kind of parodied and exaggerated biography, but they're putting themselves in that role. And here you can kind of tell that Mooney might have been more of the Eli character, mixed with maybe he was the Julian Densing character, right? Big Nut. We don't know, right? And so, but during the process of all of this, he actually was able to get prominent backers, including Christopher Storer from The Bear, and Jonah Hill came on as a producer, which did help secure A24 as a distributor. They went on to go and shoot the movie in New Jersey in 2023. And they wanted to kind of replicate the scale and feel of a big budget movie from 1998, which then brought in the cinematographer Bill Pope, who caught my eye because I'm just going to read you a list of films that he has done. Okay, this is not a complete list, but it gives you an idea. Darkman, Army of Darkness, Fire in the Sky, Clueless, Bound, Gridlocked, Zero Effect, The Matrix Reloaded, The Matrix Revolutions, Spider-Man 2, Team America World Police, Spider-Man 3, The Spirit, oddly enough, Scott Pilgrim vs. The World, Men in Black 3, The World's End, Baby Driver, Alita Battle Angel, The Boys in the Band, Shang-Chi, Ant-Man and the Wasp, and the Unfrosted. But he was credited then as William Pope, maybe to kind of throw some people off on that one. Either way, this guy shot a lot of stuff. And it's really funny that he also shot Team America World Police, because they actually brought him in for a very similar reason. When they were filming Team America World Police, they wanted to replicate like a Michael Bay style mid-90s blockbuster. And so they went and they got a cinematographer that could do that. And Bill Pope really did shoot that movie like it was a Michael Bay film, even though he has not directed a Michael Bay movie. He's worked with the Wachowskis quite a bit. And so he basically was able to take that concept and really apply it to that movie, to give it a much larger scale. And the way that they shot this movie, it did kind of feel like that as well. Albeit, I do wish it would have been maybe a little brighter in a couple of scenes. It makes sense because it's nighttime, but it would have been easier to see maybe a few things. Either way, I thought the cinematography was really good. And I really enjoyed that they were able to go for that, and they were able to really kind of like achieve it. One of the cooler aspects of it, though, was bringing in Fred Durst. So the inclusion of him in the script was pretty critical to the story because he does play a larger part in the third act. And it kind of like hinged on his involvement. And Mooney was like, I got to get this guy, because he felt that nobody else was as emblematic of the late 1990s cultural zeitgeist. And it's true. Like, if you were around back then, there's no getting away from Fred fucking Durst, man. He was everywhere. But they ended up getting him in there. And at first it was a little odd with him, but I'll talk more about that here in a bit. And, but it was good. It was good seeing Limp Bizkit, and it was good hearing Limp Bizkit. And it was great to also see Wes Borland, as himself in the movie later on. That was a great little cameo. The movie really just kind of like sold me on this late 90s idea. And it was also, again, kind of like a nice little love story kind of contained within, right? Because like to get into the movie itself, it opens up and, it's just like an AOL, logging on to AOL. And that just evoked so many damn emotions in my mind at that point in time, even though it was like, it's so vague, but it was so, I remembered so much about it. And of course he's, talking with his buddy Danny. And then you've got Laura messages him, and she's like, oh, XOXO. And he's like, ooh, does that mean she likes me? I don't quite know. But she's kind of like a coding whiz and, a little bit of a hacker sort of thing. And that kind of establishes her character. And then, Eli, heads over to Danny's house. They're going to go and chill out. They're going to go rent movies. They're going to go play video games, and that's what they're going to do for the night until they kind of go, no, let's go to this party. All right. Like, let's go and do it. Let's fucking live. And they go to this party and, Laura's going to be there and she's, now single and everything else. And so Eli's like, oh, I'm going to try to talk to her, but he kind of screws it up. And then Julian Dennison, this is the thing with best friends. This is where you could kind of tell that Danny was very Jonah Hill from Superbad, and Eli was very, Michael Cera. All right. They had the same kind of personality archetypes, albeit not as extreme, even though like Danny's out there singing the thong song and he's trying to like, impress the girls. And so he tells a story about pissing in Eli's Coke and then Eli drinks it. So they start calling him Piss Mouth. I mean, that's very 90s. It's very high school in general. But it is something a friend would do thinking it would be funny, but that's not going to really win you any points with any ladies because their entire motivation is also very American Pie-ish, which is that they want to have sex. And so they've got this Durex condom that they kind of like pass between them as like what we're going to use this condom, right? One of us tonight is going to use this condom. And you're thinking like, all right, maybe one of them's going to get laid. That's great. And then of course, when it hits midnight and the machines just start killing, it is brutal. Like it is brutal. And I give so much credit to the team on this one because the production team to design the robots the way that they did, it has very, again, like Maximum Overdrive kind of vibes to it. It's got some, I don't know why, like batteries not included. The way those robots those aliens looked in that one, a little bit like that. I don't know, and it's just like they're a combination of different electronics that come together to murder people. Like one guy's got a boner in the movie and then there's there's a blender that's like, blending his dick, right? It makes no sense, but it's crazy. Like there's a Tamagotchi controlled power drill that ends up drilling into this girl Riley's head. And then it combines into this gigantic chainsaw wielding monstrosity that ends up killing Danny in the garage. And then what's so funny is just like these people die in so violent ways. Like there's one girl, the one girl that like Danny kisses, that he, has maybe a solid shot at like hooking up with that night. She screams, she runs out of the room into another room full of just dead teenagers. And then all of a sudden, like the VCR just fires a bootleg copy of Varsity Blues, right at her head and just knocks her out. And that was very reminiscent of when the baseball team sees the soda machine to maximum overdrive and it fires out the cans and it kills the coach by hitting him in the head, right? Like very similar to that. That's where I was like, this is maximum overdrive. And then you've got, who is it? You've got Eduardo Franco as Farkas, who's, from Stranger Things season 4 and the very underrated American Vandal season 1, who is like the total jerk and he's like the total bully and he puts on rollerblades. And they go outside and there's this knocked over basketball hoop and he's all like, all right, let's go. And they start playing break stuff and he's going to go like do epic rollerblading grinding moves. And he ends up tripping and falling and breaking open his head and dying like this right there. It just dies. And you're like, okay, okay, he's gone. Let's keep going. And then, you've got Lachlan Watson as Ash and then Daniel Zolghardry as CJ, and like they're polar opposites. She's like the corporate media type of person, right? Like the what's popular in music, Limp Bizkit's her favorite band. And then he's like, no, I'm a lyricist that kind of does my own thing. I don't want corporate stuff. And they've got this back and forth. a little kind of romance building to an extent, but you also don't know because Ash also says, she's like, I'm not too sure I like boys, you know? And so that's kind of a little thing that they mention is like, okay, will they, won't they? But you are getting kind of emotionally attached to these characters at this point because they've witnessed all their friends die. They're now trying to like survive the night. They're trying to get to a safe place, all that stuff. And then, you know, things just keep going awry. And of course, you know, you got Laura and her and Eli are kind of getting more connected, but then they run into her former boyfriend, Jonas, you know, and then there's like like Jonas is like, oh, we're both alive. Let's get back together. And then, you know, you got Eli going like, I just lost my best friend. I'm kind of hitting on this girl. And then like all of a sudden, like this guy, man, you know, and of course it's like standard movie going tropes. Like you're going to see these in certain movies. Right. But then, you know, they end up having to get out of there again. Kyle Mooney kind of follows him up to this like construction site where he tries to like use those twin balancing sticks that everyone used back in the 90s to fight this crazy chainsaw wielding monstrosity. And the dude ends up just getting beheaded and dies. And it's like, okay. And then they end up falling off into the porta potty and just have that great slow motion, hilarious moment. And then from there, they end up meeting up with Fred Durst, who tells them the story about what happened with him and the concert and everything else. And then they go, okay, now we got to go. And the thing is, talk about that. Like Fred Durst is kind of like, he's at his low moment, right? And then you've got Ash going like, you're like, basically like you're Fred fucking Durst, like act like it, bitch, you know, kind of giving him like, she gives him her red hat. So he, so like, you know, he kind of puts it back on, like he's getting his lightsaber back or he's getting his uniform back or his mask back. Like it gives him the power to be Fred Durst. So then they decide to head to the school where the internet is so they can upload a kill code. And, you know, it was really funny because as they're doing this, like CJ saves Fred Durst, you know, by getting like sliced up with CDs, and Fred Durst is like, but you hate me, but you saved me. You know, it was just this like dumb little moment. But then like, in order to distract the everybody and to distract I guess you could say the monsters, the robots, whatever, you know, Fred Durst and Ash get up there and they start doing an acoustic version of Faith, which is so late 90s MTV unplugged stuff. You got to love it. And then from there, it was like really funny. And then they get back, you know, to this machine and they're trying to put the kill code in and it's electrocuting them. And so they pull out the condom and they use the condom for the latex, the rubber, to, you know, deflect the electricity, and they put the kill code in and save the day. I mean, obviously Eli and Laura kiss and they're going to get together and that's good. But then the movie like cuts to like 5 years later and they're still together, which is great. And they go to say goodbye to Danny, right? They're giving their yearly respects and like they're graduating college. And then that scene kind of made like no sense. It didn't really need to be there, right? It's not really an ending that matters, right? Because the idea there is that like Ash's new iPod starts to glitch and it kind of shows that the algorithm hasn't been destroyed. So kind of maybe setting up a sequel, but all things considered, it doesn't really need a sequel. It doesn't really need an ending like that. I mean, Y2K, they destroyed it. Y2K was kind of a disappointment. Here it is something, but it's been destroyed 5 years later. I don't really see the need of the 5 years later thing, to be fair, but that is of course just my take on that. At the end of the day, the movie did only $4.2 million, you know, in the box office. Not great. The, you know, critic score was not great on this one. You kind of got a lot of trash. They gave it a 44% on Rotten Tomatoes. And I don't really feel like that's a valid score. I just don't feel like that's a valid thing. I think the movie was released on December 6th and it was on VOD on December 24th. And as I've argued before, movies that are coming out nowadays are largely, you know, they're just marketing it for video streaming, right? And so the movie will eventually make back its budget. It will probably eventually even turn a profit. But unfortunately, it's going to be something that gets found on home video and not something that is going to get the respect it deserves right now. But give it like 5-10 years, and I think people will come back to this and be like, oh, that was actually a really underrated classic. And that's probably one I'll eventually talk about on like an overlooked hotel type movie, because it is one that I recommend to everybody. I think it's really funny, really good, and I'm totally down to watch it again. I wouldn't mind watching this back to back with, you know, Superbad, because they kind of come from the same cloth. I mean, sure, Jonah Hill is, you know, connected to both, but they feel very similarly connected. And as to a person who kind of came into my own, I turned 18 in the year 2000, right? This speaks to me, an elder millennial, on many, many, many levels. And that's why I think it's great. But I'm always curious to know your thoughts, your opinions. Let me know down in the comments section. My name is, of course, Matt Jarbo. This has been Podio Commentary. Please like the video, like the stream, like the podcast on YouTube, and then also be sure to give it a review wherever you get your podcasts. I'll talk to you guys later. Thank you again for listening. Have yourself a great day, and peace out.